Recording in progress.
And here we are. Welcome to our cosmic journey. Today is the 20th of October at exactly 5:27 p.m., otherwise known as 1727. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Jake. Also, we're in Berlin. It's worth
Wow, I missed that. I missed
yeah,
that
it's
part.
worth pointing out because we sometimes are not.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I did the entire intro all correctly, and here I am messing it up. So this cycle, I will tell you, was not named our doom metal band before. I think our cycle was named labels, comma, but the good kind, because we
Yes.
had this idea that we were going to bring labeling into the product and start talking a little bit about like what what does a kind of filled out chart, because we're just kind of filling out the chart. That's kind of the deal.
Yeah.
And then something happened, which I guess will get us to kind of point two here, the latency platform meltdown and what we learned, and more
Yeah.
importantly, what we are learning. But
To be
before we
clear,
get to,
the
oh, go ahead.
latency platform meltdown is the name of our doom metal band. Just to draw those two things together.
I understand. The problem here, just be very clear for a second. If I there's you can't file names can't contain any of these things. So you're breaking Obsidian. That's the problem. So it's our doom metal band latency platform meltdown. But before we get to all of that, Mr. Henry, I believe you have a check-in question for us.
I do. I have a check-in question because it was my job to come up with a check-in question this week, which is always like the hardest thing for me of like.
Was it the hardest thing for you this week?
No, it was definitely not the hardest thing this cycle, but when it comes to like prepping for these videos, it is definitely the hardest thing.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully this isn't a stupid question, but if you could pick any celestial body to visit, which one would you visit and why? And there's kind of an assumption to this question that like, it could be like a sci-fi world where you could just like instantly teleport from one place to
Oh,
another and you don't have to worry about like
oh,
maybe you could even go inside a gas giant or something if you wanted to, right? Like I
oh,
think you
right,
could
of
be
course.
flexible and creative with it if you wanted to.
Hmm, that's a good question. I think the thing that I would want to see, I don't know enough about like our galaxy or our universe, even for that matter. But what I would want to see is something very much like Tatooine that had multiple suns. And so I don't know where that would be, but like I'm looking for like let's go for my celestial kind of vacation hotspot right now. Has to have three suns, has to have five moons, and um a pool
Not a sense of
next to the yurt that will be there, thinking very much about Tatooine. That's my very bad answer for
Yeah, I
this
like it.
question.
You want to see a lot of like big things in the sky, like kind
I
of.
just, you know what? I'm looking for objects in the sky. I'm looking for visible planets, whether they are moons or suns or other things. But yeah, I'm looking for all of that. I'm looking for things that go around me. What are
Yeah,
you
yeah, I
looking
like
for?
that because I feel like the the classic sci-fi scene, is you on this like planet surface and then there's like, three suns or something to like really make it clear that like this is not Earth. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
But there are yurts for some reason here,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
though
yeah.
it's not Earth. Yeah,
Futuristic yurts though.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, let's be clear. We're not going for some old school yurt on this planet.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Super hyper futuristic yurts.
Right.
Um mine would be Europa, the moon of Jupiter, because there's kind of this mystery, like it's got this like icy crust, but then the icy crust has apparently moved a lot in relation to the core,
Cool.
and so there's this idea that it's like not connected to the mantle at all. So it's just kind of like this free floating like ice mass on the top of like this massive saltwater ocean apparently.
Cool.
um,
I
and
mean, it
and
sounds
and
like
a
a lot
thin
of.
atmosphere of oxygen. And so this is why like that there's like a movie there's like a sci-fi movie, I think like Europa Report or something like this, that was like made on this idea, and it's like a horror movie where there's like a big monster in the water. But actually I think that does an injustice to the strange feeling of like peering into the void. It's like the it's the like unfathomably large body of water that you're in, and then all of a sudden it like lights up from the bottom so that you can get a sense for the volume of it, and it has that feeling of like, oh, it's kind of terrifying because there's just so much of it and it's so vast. And I feel like it gives me that kind of like weird tingly feeling if I think about like walking on the surface of this like icy like surface, and then underneath is this like, who knows what's down there. It's actually better when you don't know what's down there.
Yeah, I'm liking where this is going, because I like the idea that there's an icy crust that just basically moves around, just kind of like.
Yeah, it's just kind of slipping around on the surface.
I'm trying to think of some type of metaphor for something that is within our earthly spheres, like our earthly realm right now, of like this ball that's on top of a ball. I feel like there's like this picture in my head of something that I could have bought at a Brookstone back in the day, but I can't think of what that fun little office toy would be.
Yeah,
Definitely not the clacky Newton balls or whatever that's called.
yeah, yeah,
Something in that section over
yeah,
there.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a there's something.
Definitely sharper image type of like Skymall type of aesthetic that's in
Yeah,
my mind
it
right
looks
now.
really really cool in the magazine, but then when you get it, it has this kind of like jank feeling to it, and you're like,
Perfect.
this isn't kind of as cool as I thought it was going to be.
Well, uh to that point, I feel like we had some stuff that we showed that was magazine quality, but then we got it in our hands and may have come across a little bit more jank. Do you want to go on and talk about our doom metal band, which is called Latency Platform Meltdown?
It might seem to our gentle viewers as though I laid that transition up for you. I wanted to point out that you're just that good at transitions.
That's very sweet of you. I used to be a game show host, and so I listen for the times to move
Yeah.
things forward. None of this is really planned. Like literally about 5 minutes before we go on there and we do little silly things. We're like, what do we talk about today? And I was like, well, essentially I'll be interviewing you today. So we had some problems with the platform. Can you talk a little bit about like where we ended up last week, early this week, with
Yeah.
the platform, and how we ended up there, and let's start there before we get into the big feelings part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And this kind of all came about with actually it actually all came about from me procrastinating working on the labels problem, because there was a particularly thorny thing there that I just didn't want to have to think about with like laying out SVG stuff. And so I was like, it had been kind of on the back of my head to get a staging environment up, like not in like an official staging environment because we're just really not ready for that yet, but getting something up so that you could use it, you could use the app,
Wherever I'm at.
yeah,
Yeah.
wherever you're at, and so that we could
And
just have
actually,
like these kind of ongoing dev builds on there.
exactly. And the staging server that you got set up is literally like right
On,
there.
yeah, it's actually down from there, but yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah,
in
it's
that
down from
cabinet
there.
anyway.
It's right
Uh,
there.
yeah.
Right there.
So yeah, so basically, this all started because we put that I put a build on there, and then I noticed a bit of jank. If you're curious what jank is, we have a ticket that about animation that actually links to the definition of jank. You can look it up online.
Oh.
It's actually like a technical term now, which basically means anytime you have some kind of latency in an animation that should be smooth, that causes it to be chunky, or causes it to lose frames. And so anybody who's playing along at this point, for sure knows about Urania and knows about like, part of the impetus for creating Urania in the first place was a desire to be able to render charts in real time in computer sciencey terms, meaning like in an imperceptible amount of time between frames. Which is generally considered to be around 60 frames per second. Urania today actually operates at around 30, but it's still plenty fast enough. However, part of the architectural choices that we made, and I put "we" in quotes here because
I didn't do it.
there's definition.
Yeah, this is, I mean, so jank, by the way, according to the Wiktionary, is a back formation of janky, which would be etymology from junky, comparative janky or superlative jankiest. I'm Jinkischten, as we would say in German, of poor quality. It's barely holding together. It's so janky.
Yeah, go down to
is
this second etymology too. This is the one that's more apropos for us.
Etymology 2, adjective
Yeah,
of a
unresponsive
software.
of a software application to
I see. I see what you're saying. It's of a software application interface, sluggish, unresponsive.
This is actually a
And I
technical
guess,
term these days.
yeah. And it implies of poor quality, but
Exactly.
it doesn't have to be of poor quality. But it
Yeah.
seems and feels like poor quality. That's
Yeah, exactly. It's poor quality that comes from interjection of latency that shouldn't be there. And so
okay.
in the context of latency, and coming back to like our architectural choices, which this is entirely on me. This is my bad. It's part of our learning.
We're not at the big feelings just yet. We're just talking about getting to big feelings. So
yes, yeah.
You got the server, you started looking at it, and then you started seeing Jank.
Correct. Yes.
Can you demonstrate for us Jank?
Yes. Yeah. I do want to say before we get into like actually demoing the Jank though, that this was a problem of our own making.
As I understand.
Yeah.
I don't have the sword with me, but I'll be glad to put it up so that you can throw yourself upon it very soon.
Yes, thank you. So this is what we've shown before. So this should look familiar to everybody. And when I hit Command K, which I just did, the chart pops up instantly, or the Cosmic Console pops up instantly. And if I say, if I use the arrow keys, they move around instantly. If I say move to now, that happens instantly. And if I hit 3, for example, to go forward, this basically all happens very instantly. Everything is very
great.
Everything is very fast.
Everything's fast and looks great.
Now, let's just do a little. Oh, crap! I have to move this very briefly.
Gonna move me out of the way.
Yeah, just for a second here. Also, we now know that those movements don't actually come through in the video, so whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of ignore the man behind the curtains sort of thing, but the important thing to know here is that hold on, sorry, I have to pull up my notes here really
for a second.
It's called enable latency simulation, this fun little thing here. And I'm going to do 1 second of latency. 1 second of latency in computer sciencey terms is an enormous amount of time. But when you're talking about network latency, we're going to get into this and why this is important. When you're talking about network latency, that's not unheard of. You could easily have 1,000-second latency spikes when talking to almost any network, and networks are very difficult and complicated things that sort of do this, and it annoys everybody.
There's geographies worldwide, so very famously, like India has a pretty unstable network, but even if you're in the United States and certain rural areas, having this type of latency is not unheard of.
Yeah, or even if you're in a very well-served area and you just happen to be on a network that's getting flooded, or you happen to be on a device that fails and is like in the process of doing failover, right? Like all of these things happen. It's more likely to happen if you have crappy infrastructure, but yeah, it's a real problem. So now I'm interjecting a simulation of a high latency network, and now I'm going to hit Command K. Oops, not there though. I'm going to hit Command K up here, and then I'm going to hit the down arrow key, and then I'm going to hit the down arrow key and the up arrow key, and then I'm going to say hit enter on move to now, and then I'm going to hit the 3 key.
Slow.
Hit the 3 key again, right? So now you're seeing what this would look and feel like over a network that was currently experiencing 1 second latency.
That's not good.
That's not good. So Jank. And Jank is something, what we're trying to deliver with Cosmic and what we're trying to deliver with particularly the astrology portion of Cosmic that we're working on, is an amazing user experience that feels slick and nice, but that also has all of the accessibility and ease of use of just going to a site in your browser and then being able to use software that's doing a lot of very complicated things very, very quickly and is not, how we would say, sensitive to network latency.
Yeah. And so from here, Trey and I had a lot of discussions about like, are we going to move back to making desktop software? Do we
This is where the big feelings came in.
Yeah, do we ditch the whole idea of like a web delivered product? Do we have a separate product that is kind of like a web delivered product, but essentially that the what we call the growth loop? So from you to go from guest to member, or like you are just a guest on our website to you have an account, for example, is to download software. And I was telling Trey, it's like that's a really big thing to ask people to do, and I don't know if we're going to do that.
Yeah.
So we just started doing, both he and I, but mostly Trey, started doing lots and lots and lots of research about, especially around like, what do large companies in that are primarily based in poor infrastructure countries do for their platform choices, and what types of software, kind of web delivered software experiences, most notably like design software, most notably Figma, what do they do in these cases? Because they suffer, they could suffer from this like crazy.
Yes, yeah. So Figma is a great example of this because Figma has the sort of situation where they are a web delivered product. They do have a desktop version, but the desktop version is really just a very thin wrapper on top of their web app with some extra stuff for like loading fonts off your local machine and giving you notifications.
Right.
And it's a really interesting problem because they needed to be able to provide an incredibly fast, responsive, fluid, scalable platform for people to do a really hard problem, which is creating design software and being able to support the things like desktop software can, like having hundreds of thousands of objects on the screen at one time and being able to zoom in and out at 60 frames per second. Like that in and of itself, when you're in the best scenarios, is like very, very difficult. So yeah, like Jake said, we started digging into this a bit more. And fortunately, Figma has also been very transparent about a lot of their processes. We talked a little bit ago about a great article that they wrote about hotkeys and keyboard layouts, which was super important for us as well. And so looking at what they did, they had this really great article about the first code that they started writing for providing this platform is in C++, which is a very low level programming languages for writing real-time code. And
Right.
but the problem with C++ is that it's not particularly portable. Well, actually, I should take that back. It is very portable if you want to install something on somebody's machine. If you want to deliver something via the web, it's traditionally not particularly portable. Here's where a cool technology thing comes in. We now have, generally broadly supported within web browsers, the ability to have very low-level code run within the browser that's written in a low-level language like C or C++ or Rust, more in a more modern context, that runs very quickly and very efficiently, but still runs within the browser, what's called the browser sandbox. So it still has all the safety guarantees and all the security guarantees, but it's very, very quick. And so they actually write C++ code, which gets compiled into this new thing, which is called WASM or WebAssembly, shortened to WASM for short.
Right.
And so they actually have, that's where the majority of their, like when you go and you like load Figma, whether you do it from the browser or from their app, you're actually looking at their WebAssembly thing rendering to what's called a canvas, which is a particular kind of like drawing surface that can be shown in the web. I feel like that's a deep enough explanation, right?
Yeah. And I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the appreciation that you have for certain folks that are helping to put tools of astrology, such as the Swiss Ephemeris, into this WASM thing. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wanted to explain the kind of like, yeah, the
Yeah,
looking at Figma and kind of like this model of stuff, right?
of
So
course.
the big question for us was when it comes to a lot of the core calculations for astrological functions, so like where are planets at a particular point in time, for example. This is all being provided by a piece of software. We've talked about this before. It's called the Swiss Ephemeris, and it's very cool. And it's written in C, which is even kind of like let's say, less complicated and more straightforward than C++. And so, and it really has very few dependencies. And consequently, thanks to some work from a couple of other folks, which we'll get into in a second, there is actually, somebody has already done a proof of concept of compiling the Swiss Ephemeris to WebAssembly, this new fast thing. Yeah, I actually have this up and ready to go. I was going to share.
Oh, it's okay. I got it. I got you.
And then, yeah, so u-blusky is that's their GitHub username of somebody who took some prior work and then built a pretty cool little proof of concept on top of it. So since you're already sharing, if you want to go to the astro.com, there's no link from it here, but do you have that up?
No.
The
Here,
makers of the Swiss Ephemeris actually have this available and running on the website so that you can see what it is. It's pretty pretty straightforward. It just gets the positions of things and lists them on a table. But it does it without communicating to the server. And oh yeah, and on the callouts, there's a I love this GitHub username, randogoth. So randogoth was the person who had originally done some of this work to compile the Swiss Ephemeris to WebAssembly. So looking at that, I then went and said, like, okay, can we do this? It's not, what they're doing is not exactly what we need to do, and we have some different needs when it comes to like the data that we have and what we need to represent and how we need to call it. And so, but I was able to do a quick proof of concept to basically like compile the whole thing and then actually demonstrate that it works with more data. So the cool thing about this is this now gets us to, instead of having this round trip where you have a network connection, which is causing this jank to happen, or could potentially cause this jank to happen, we've taken that step out and we've moved all of the really hard stuff closer to like actually in the browser where you're going to be doing a lot of the work of astrology. So now this is where we maybe talk a little bit about the trade-offs between different architecture styles. So part of the reason, I'll cover this quickly, part of the reason why we went with the architectural choices that we did go with, which is, for those playing along, it's Phoenix and Elixir and a particular technology in Phoenix called LiveView. And we were like all that stuff that we've been demoing was all done within LiveView, but LiveView has this part of what it's able to do that's really clever and really cool is that it gives you a really nice way of being able to build this applications that kind of exist sort of in a little bit of a middle ground between client and server. So it's a little bit kind of, you could do a lot more really cool stuff. And we're still going to do that really cool stuff in cases where network latency is not going to cause, like where jank is not going to actually be a problem. So the users who are familiar with or viewers who are familiar with like the Facebook app or like in almost any social networking app or anything like that, where there's a network latency sort of round trip to like maybe rendering things in the first place. You might see like a list of things and they're kind of like pulsing and there's not actually anything there, but it's giving you this indication that like, hey, we're going to get stuff, and then stuff loads in. We'll still do stuff like that, which this platform gives us really powerful control over, and we still get all of the rest of the goods that it provides us on the back. But
go ahead.
But we now can also, we're now adding this sort of new layer within the front end, creating this sort of Frankenstein's monster in a way, which then will give us the ability to create very rich experiences on the client that aren't susceptible to network latency.
Yep. And so the way that Figma gets around this, I'm going to just share my screen. This is just big old Figma, but I'm going to open up this board here. It's called UI Inspiration Studies. And you can see that there's a bunch of images on here, like a bunch. Also this cosmic astrology object map as well. But if I open this up, what you're going to see is that all of a sudden the text renders first of all is very quick. All the text renders first, and then it brings in the images later. We can do stuff like that.
Exactly.
Also, these are animated GIFs down here, and like it doesn't load those until I hit the plus sign.
Yeah, so there's a like there's no one size fits all answer to this kind of thing. And so having the flexibility to be able to provide pulsing load indicator when that's an acceptable and appropriate thing to do, or to provide so like actual real-time results when that's something that's necessary. And so you just really have to be able to kind of hit all of these different notes. Modern application development is it's quite hard. Like the bar is very high from an experience perspective. Like we all just have very high expectations. And Jake and I have very high expectations for ourselves. We won't make software if it's got Jank in it. We don't want that. So it's just the bar is very high. And so you have to be able to address all of these things. And this is where this like architectural trade-off kind of thing comes in. Part of what drew me to just doing all of this stuff in this one framework and platform was that it gave me in particular the ability to not have to do a lot of context switching when I'm working. So I can work in one language, I can work in one platform, and I can just kind of go. Unfortunately, that platform makes some assumptions which work really well in some cases, but not great in other cases. Yeah. And it just so happens that we're really building an application that has a lot of stuff that needs to happen in that one case that's not served well this way.
Yeah.
So instead of throwing all that stuff out, what we're doing is we're adding another layer in there. And the cost to this is that now I do have to context switch, and anybody we bring on as a software engineer will also have to do this kind of context switching. They will have to move between Elixir and Phoenix and LiveView and the stuff that we're going to be using on the front end, which is TypeScript for those playing along.
But dear Trey, not the viewer, but dear Trey, one of the good things about this is that because the Elixir and Phoenix stuff sits more on the back end, and then the front end would be something like React with TypeScript. Now, all of a sudden, the front end creation comes a little bit closer to me. And so now when I'm prototyping experiences, they can feel there's a little bit more of a way to move forward from something that I create into a platform, where in the past, when this was all live view, we were like, maybe it will work, maybe it won't work. We don't know, because it was just all a little, I guess, far away. Like I'm creating things that can sometimes feel like it's like speaking, I'm trying to think of like the way to say this. It's like we moved to like, now we've got someone speaking Creole French to someone speaking French from Quebec. And before we were like, I don't know, he's speaking Esperanto, she's speaking Japanese. I hope that they are going to get some communication across. And I just didn't think that bridge seemed a little bit too far for me, but I was like, we'll see in the future if we can get prototypes going from me and then get them onto the platform in a meaningful, easy way.
Yeah, exactly. So this new model actually gives us the ability to go from being able to prototype richer experiences more directly in the way that they're going to actually be, what we say productionized, like how they'll actually end up in the product. And which is the last point, which I actually did my points in sort of slightly out of order, but who cares? Nobody can see my notes.
Who cares?
They're right here though, in case anybody wants to see.
Ooh.
Yes. So we are utilizing a client-side animation framework, which is very efficient and very and does a lot of really cool things. It gives us, it's more almost like on the side of a game engine, which was always kind of my ideal scenario, because eventually we're not just going to be talking about astrology. Eventually we're going to be talking about other things too, like my project with Heather Freeman called Mosaic, which has physics and like a lot of stuff going on within that application. And we want to be able to bring that as well to this same platform eventually down the road. And so how are we going to do that? So this sets us up for that as well. So we're going to be using a thing called Pixie or Pixie.js. And do you want to share that really quick or?
Yeah, I could bring it up. I was actually looking at Fable as well, just in case.
Yeah. There's I don't think we ever really did that sort of deep dive on animation tooling and what a pain.
Yeah, it was on our things to do. But this is Pixie.js, and the idea here is that actually it's following my cursor. I had no idea. That's great.
Interactive.
It is really around 2D WebGL rendering and
Yeah, which
what you're seeing. Yeah,
probably
go
doesn't
ahead.
mean a
You
lot
can
to a
talk
lot
a
of
little bit
people.
about what that is.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Tell
Oh,
tell
yeah.
tell
Sorry.
the tell the dear viewer what this all is.
Yeah, basically, it's just it gives us a way of providing very rich and very fast interactions on it within the browser. So this basically gives you a way to do a bunch of stuff within the application, which will actually run on the graphics hardware, what's called the GPU of the machine of the person who's going to the website, instead of it having to be done by our hosts and our servers. Which gives us the ability, and you can see that some of these things that Jake is showing right now are they feel very sort of like 2D gamey kind of thing, and that's for good reason, because this gives us that ability to do very graphically intensive things in very fast ways. And this is,
When you said very fast ways, we went to Star Warp. That was
I love that.
Perfect
Yeah, that's
timing.
perfect timing. Yeah. So anyway, we don't need to dig too much more into the weeds on the technical side here, but just to know that like we're trying to set ourselves up so that we can deliver really cool, really fun, really rich experiences that won't have jank.
Jank free
Jank
for
free.
2024,
Yeah.
not 2023.
And
We're
it
getting rid of
comes
our.
and it comes with this cost, right? Like it comes with this cost of like
Yeah.
things are just going to be harder, you know, like I'm going to have to do a lot of context switching. We'll probably actually start talking about our cycles a little bit more in this way. Like, okay, you know, this cycle I was working mostly on this front end stuff, so I could put on my like, you know, my like Pixie TypeScript hat for this period of time, and then it's like, okay, now we're going to do a bunch more stuff in like Gatekeeper and perspectives and the API or whatever. And so then I'm going to put on my Elixir and Phoenix and LiveView hat, and then do that for a little bit of time, and then hopefully we can hire somebody soon who can take one of those hats and keep it.
And I'm gonna have to start moving a little bit closer to the front end as well. It's for everyone's sanity. Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else that we learned or are learning that we would like to tell the dear viewer about?
Just to reiterate that, as we talked about in the past, the idea that sometimes you won't know something until you really touch it and feel it and do it, and you get far enough into it. And this is why it's really important to have a kind of culture of experimentation and being able to say, like, we're going to have to throw stuff away. Like the next time we do a demo, hopefully we'll be able to demo some of this new stack stuff. And when we do, we probably won't even have a chart anymore. Like from a purely like view, like from the outside perspective, this will be like a step backward. But sometimes you take a step back in order to like be able to go a lot faster in the future. So
yeah, honestly, we just have to. The only way that this stuff works is if you do it enough so you can feel it, and then once you feel it and you're like, I can see a future for this, or not. If I can't see a future for this whole latency thing. The thing about this latency thing is you might be saying to yourself, well, it seems unreasonable to kind of condemn a platform because you've got this latency simulator and you put it at 1 second. Like, I know, Jake, you said that this is a completely normal amount of time, but like, what are you dooming? Actually, we simulated this for real. We just assumed that like the server is sitting in Berlin, and I decided, and we can have servers everywhere, so this doesn't really count. But I decided to do a VPN to Vancouver, and then I was kind of bouncing to Vancouver and bouncing back, and it was just like this. Even if it wasn't that much latency, it was like, and I was like,
yeah, I actually put it at 1 second so you'd be able to see it in the video, because this video itself has latency and can drop frames and stuff like that. So it's not, you won't necessarily be able to tell on the video. So I really wanted to make it like ultra clear. But you know, spikes of like 250, 300 milliseconds is incredibly common when going over the transatlantic pipe. And even with numbers that low, when you use it locally, it's way more jank than you want to have it. I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that like 16 milliseconds is 60 frames per second, something like that.
I remember.
And so you're talking about very short periods of time in order to make something feel truly fluid. And we're going to be able to get a lot of frames per second, more frames per second than you would be able to visualize on most people's computers using this new thing versus using the trying to do this stuff with the old thing.
That seems like a good time to probably close out this video and end
Yeah.
with a promise. You will see things better. We will do better. We will be hotter. We'll have gotten more sleep and have taken our vitamins. And you, dear viewer, will be very happy with us next cycle.
Should we close out with the letting and the kerning?
No, I said I was never doing that dance again. If you would like to do the letting and the kerning dance,
No,
you're more than welcome.
it's a group dance. It's not a single dance.
Oh, I did it.
Goodbye.
Bye. We love you. Bye.